Imagine a prophet, right? Somebody who can just, see centuries into the future and predict the exact kind of insidious ways that humanity will eventually surrender its freedom.
Oh, that sounds like a trope straight out of a Greek myth.
Yeah, exactly. Like the blind seer who trades his physical eyes for the ultimate truth. But the crazy thing is, this actually happened.
Right.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today, we are jumping into a massive stack of sources for you. We've got these really extensive biographical accounts, historical records, and deep literary analyses.
It's a huge pile of material.
It really is, and we are using all of it to explore the life and the masterwork of a very real visionary, Aldous Huxley.
And, our goal today isn't just to give you a basic summary of his 1932 classic, Brave New World.
No, definitely not.
Right? We're really pulling these sources apart to map the intersections of his life. How this highly eclectic personal evolution birthed a terrifyingly accurate prediction about a society that's controlled entirely by pleasure.
Yeah, and to understand that sheer scale of his vision, we really have to look at the mechanisms of his past. Because his predictions didn't just come out of nowhere.
No, they came from a deeply frustrated scientific mind.
Exactly. And I want to start right there with that frustration, because the sources point out that Huxley came from this incredibly intimidating family tree.
Oh, absolutely.
Like his grandfather was Thomas Henry Huxley, right? A famous zoologist who was literally known as Darwin's bulldog.
Yeah, because of his fierce, very public defense of the theory of evolution.
All right. So Aldous was essentially bred for the laboratory. He was practically destined for this prestigious career in medicine. But then, right as a teenager, his own biology betrays him.
Yeah, it's a tragic irony, really. He contracted a severe eye disease called keratitis punctata.
And this wasn't just, needing a strong pair of glasses.
No, not at all. It caused severe inflammation of his corneas. For about 2 to 3 years, right when he was supposed to be doing all that rigorous foundational lab work, he was left practically blind.
Well,
He literally had to learn to read Braille. It completely derailed his trajectory. He couldn't use a microscope anymore.
imagine training your whole life to be an Olympic sprinter,
Right.
right? Only to lose your legs, so you decide to become a chess grandmaster instead. Because if he couldn't use a microscope, he had to apply that inherited scientific rigor to something else.
Right, and he pivots to literature, which feels like the absolute opposite of empirical science.
It does.
But what's fascinating here is a quote from his brother, Julian.
Oh, right. Julian became an outstanding biologist himself.
Exactly. Julian famously called Aldous's blindness a blessing in disguise.
A blessing being blind.
Yeah, because it closed the door to that specialized microscopic research. It forced Aldous to become a universalist.
Okay, so what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, back then in the scientific community, you were expected to just, isolate a single variable in a lab and study it for decades.
Right, highly specialized.
Yeah, but Aldous couldn't do that. So instead, he took all of human knowledge as his province. He synthesized biology, philosophy, art, history. He looked at the macro patterns of human behavior instead of the micro patterns of cellular division.
Okay, I think I see the mechanism there.
Yeah.
So since he couldn't isolate variables in a petri dish, he used his novels like a pressure cooker.
That's a great way to put it.
He'd take a societal trend, throw human morality into the pot, turn the heat up to 100, and just observe the reaction.
Yes. He treated fiction as an epistemological tool.
Hmm.
But, before he could fully utilize that tool, he actually had to make a living.
Which leads to this absolutely fascinating collision of historical figures. So, after Oxford, Huxley takes a job teaching French at Eton College.
Right.
And I have to bring up this trivia from the sources because it is just too good. One of the teenage boys sitting in Huxley's French class was Eric Blair.
Better known to the whole world, of course, as George Orwell.
Yeah, George Orwell. Okay, let's unpack this, because the sources paint a pretty dismal picture of Huxley's actual teaching skills.
Oh, they do. They say he was largely incompetent as a schoolmaster.
Right. He couldn't keep order. The kids walked all over him. The classroom was just pure chaos. So I am genuinely struggling to understand how this passive teacher, who couldn't even command a room full of teenagers, ends up profoundly influencing the guy who wrote 1984.
Well, you have to realize that managing a rowdy classroom and inspiring an intellectual awakening, those require entirely different skill sets.
For a point.
Orwell and some of the other students noted that while Huxley couldn't enforce discipline at all, his command of language was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, he didn't teach them how to sit still. He taught them how to use words with surgical precision. He showed them how language could be weaponized for social critique.
He was planting those seeds of linguistic clarity.
Exactly. Seeds that Orwell would later use to completely dissect authoritarianism.
But of course, Huxley's universalist mind didn't stay stuck in academia for very long. He started looking at the massive societal shifts happening around him.
Especially the rapid industrialization of the 1920s and 30s.
Yeah. And the sources point to a really specific catalyst that terrified him into writing Brave New World.
Right. He spent time observing the Brenner and Mond chemical plant in northeast England. It was this incredibly advanced, highly organized facility.
And around that same time, he also read Henry Ford's autobiography, My Life and Work.
Right. He just absorbed the sheer efficiency of the assembly line, the mass production, the extreme predictability, the complete elimination of any friction.
And if you take that obsession with predictability, right, and you run it out a few centuries, you get the world state.
His terrifying vision of the future.
Exactly. The setting of Brave New World is London in the year AF 632, which stands for After Ford.
They literally elevated Henry Ford to a messianic figure.
Yeah, they say, oh, Ford instead of, oh, Lord. But I want to dig into the mechanics of this society because they don't just use assembly lines to make cars, do they?
No. They use them to make people.
That is just, it's horrifying.
It's the core horror of his vision, yeah. Huxley extrapolated the logic of the factory and applied it directly to human biology. In the world state, natural birth is considered completely disgusting. It's obsolete.
Humans are just mass-produced in these giant hatcheries. The sources outline this biological manufacturing method called the Bokanovsky process.
Right.
But I couldn't quite wrap my head around the why of it. Why go through the trouble of chemically forcing a single fertilized egg to divide and create up to 96 identical clones?
Well, because individuality is the ultimate enemy of the assembly line.
Oh wow.
Yeah, think about it. If you have 96 genetically identical humans, you have absolute predictability in your workforce. You don't have unique desires or, varying levels of ambition.
No interpersonal friction.
Exactly. You just have a uniform batch of biological machines. And from the moment they're in their artificial bottles, they are chemically manipulated into a strict caste system.
From alphas all the way down to epsilons.
Right. The alpha leaders get optimal nutrients, but the epsilon menial laborers, they intentionally receive alcohol and less oxygen.
To intentionally stunt their physical and mental development.
Yes. They are engineering the physical capacity for rebellion completely out of the human genome.
But they don't just rely on biology, right? There's a huge psychological component to the control, too.
Oh, absolutely. The control extends way beyond the hatchery. They utilize a mechanism called hypnopedia.
Sleep learning.
Yes.
Let me push back on that a bit, though, because I've always wondered about the actual efficacy of that concept. I mean, I'm struggling to see how simply repeating phrases at a sleeping child permanently overrides human nature. Wouldn't they naturally develop resentments eventually?
Well, Huxley's genius was understanding that you don't use sleep learning to teach facts or, complex logic.
Right.
You use it to bypass the rational brain entirely. You're installing baseline emotional reactions.
Yeah.
While the children sleep, these recorded voices repeat caste-specific slogans hundreds of thousands of times over years.
Right.
It literally wires their nervous systems to feel this deep, irrational comfort with their assigned social role. Epsilons are conditioned to feel genuine physiological relief that they don't have the intellectual burden of the alphas.
The conditioning just becomes their internal voice.
Exactly.
And if that internal voice ever does feel, I don't know, a flicker of doubt or sadness, the state provides a chemical safety net. They definitely have to talk about soma.
The ultimate tool of control.
Yeah, it's this hallucinogenic antidepressant that the government just hands out freely. If you feel stressed, you take a gram of soma and go on this blissful, side effect-free vacation in your mind.
Right.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Humanity actively pursues a frictionless existence. We want to cure disease. We want to eliminate aging. We invent drugs to treat anxiety and depression. Why is this a dystopia if everyone is genuinely happy and cared for?
That exact question is the brilliant trap that Huxley sets for the reader. To understand why it's a dystopia, you have to look at the cultural context of the 1920s and 30s. At that time, authors like H.G. Wells were writing highly optimistic, utopian science fiction.
Oh, right. Very different tone.
Very different. Wells imagined a future where a scientifically managed world would eliminate war, poverty, and suffering. He genuinely believed in an egalitarian society guided by this benevolent, highly educated elite.
And Huxley looked at that optimism and essentially said, you are fundamentally misunderstanding human nature.
Exactly. He realized that if you apply the logic of industrial efficiency to psychology, you don't get human liberation. You get the ultimate inescapable prison.
Because the happiness is entirely unearned, it's manufactured.
Yes. The world state doesn't need secret police or torture chambers because soma and biological conditioning do the heavy lifting for them. The citizens have willingly traded human agency for comfort.
Which leads us directly to the philosophical heart of the novel. The tension between manufactured comfort and authentic humanity centers around an ideological clash between two characters.
Right, a really profound debate.
You have Mustafa Mond, the resident world controller of Western Europe. He's incredibly intelligent and knows exactly how the system operates behind the curtain. And on the other side, you have John the Savage.
John is such a fascinating character.
He really is. He's an outsider, born naturally on a remote reservation, and his entire worldview was formed by reading a salvaged copy of the complete works of William Shakespeare.
It is a masterful juxtaposition.
Yeah.
You have Mond, this cold architect of manufactured bliss, and John, whose mind is completely wired by the raw, messy, violent, passionate poetry of Shakespeare.
So when John is brought to the world state, he's completely disgusted by the empty consumerism, the complete lack of any real emotional depth. He outright refuses to conform, which leads to this face-to-face debate with Mond.
Right.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Mond explains that to achieve total stability, the state had to sacrifice art, deep connections, and even science. But wait, if this society literally worships efficiency and technology, why on earth would they suppress science?
Because science, in its truest form, is the pursuit of objective truth. And objective truth inherently creates instability.
Oh, I see.
Right? If you allow people to freely question the nature of reality, or if a new scientific discovery challenges the established social order, your perfectly balanced assembly line just falls apart.
Right.
Mond explains that the state only allows applied science, the kind that makes better machines or better drugs. Pure, inquisitive science is heavily censored.
It's the exact same reason they banned Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Another character in the book, a writer named Helmholtz, he realizes that you literally cannot write good poetry without what he calls wind and storms.
Yes.
You need struggle to create meaning.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Huxley is illustrating a profound mechanism of the human condition here. Human greatness, passion, and meaning are inextricably linked to our capacity to suffer.
Yeah.
If you engineer a world without pain, you also engineer a world without heroism, without profound love, and without high art.
And John rejects Mond's perfectly stable world entirely. He tells the world controller that he doesn't want manufactured comfort. He demands the right to poetry, the right to real danger, the right to freedom.
He wants it all.
Yeah, and he finishes it by claiming the right to be unhappy. It is just a staggering demand.
And Mond calmly replies, "You're welcome to it."
Wow.
Because Mond knows the state has already won. He knows that John's psychological need for authentic suffering is utterly incompatible with their world, and it will ultimately destroy him.
That distinction between pleasure and pain as a control mechanism, that's exactly what triggered Huxley's famous critique of his former student, George Orwell.
It's the ultimate dystopian debate. Two incredibly different visions of how a totalitarian state maintains its grip on power.
Right, because Orwell published 1984 in 1949, which is 17 years after Brave New World.
Yeah, and the sources outline this amazing letter that Huxley wrote to Orwell in October 1949, right after reading it.
Right. Huxley politely praises the book, but then he confidently tells Orwell that the future of tyranny isn't going to be the boot on the face.
Exactly. He argues that ruling through terror and clubs and secret police, that's exhausting. It's inefficient.
Instead, he predicts that future dictators will use narco-hypnosis and conditioning. They will secure their power by suggesting people into loving their servitude.
The social critic Neil Postman analyzed this rivalry brilliantly. He pointed out the underlying mechanisms of their different fears.
What did he say?
Well, he noted that Orwell feared those who would ban books. Huxley, on the other hand, feared a world where there would be no reason to ban a book because no one would actually want to read one.
That is so relevant today. Think about the mechanics of our own society right now. Think about you listening to this and the last time you spent 3 hours mindlessly scrolling on your phone.
Right.
Just absorbing algorithmically generated videos instead of doing something challenging. Are we already living in Huxley's world? Are we loving our distractions?
Postman frames it perfectly. He says Orwell feared the truth would be deliberately concealed from us by a dictatorship. But Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a massive sea of irrelevant trivia.
Wow.
Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture. Orwell feared that what we hate will ruin us, but Huxley feared that what we love will ruin us.
It's a chilling diagnosis, and it really makes me wonder how Huxley himself coped with this realization. If he truly believed society was hurtling toward mindless distraction, what did he do?
Well, the sources say he packed up and moved to Los Angeles in 1937.
Wait, he went to the literal epicenter of manufactured entertainment.
It is a massive irony. He ended up working in Hollywood as a screenwriter.
And the financial mechanics of this move are staggering. The writer Christopher Isherwood noted that Huxley was making over $3,000 a week.
Which is an insane amount of money for that time.
Yeah, if you adjust that for inflation, he was making roughly $50,000 a week in today's money, just working on scripts for massive studio projects.
He was sitting right in the belly of the beast. I mean, Hollywood is the closest thing the 20th century had to the feelies, that mind-numbing, immersive entertainment he predicted in his novel.
But he didn't just hoard that Hollywood money and buy into the consumerism, did he?
No, not at all. He utilized that massive income for a very specific purpose. He used a huge chunk of it to sponsor Jewish and left-wing writers and artists transporting refugees safely out of Hitler's Germany.
That's incredible. But beyond his physical actions, living in California profoundly changed his internal philosophy, too.
I guess it did.
The sources mention he shifted from being this deeply cynical satirist to becoming a genuine spiritual explorer. He connected with an intellectual named Gerald Hurd, who introduced him to Vedanta, a Hindu philosophy.
Right, and he fully embraced what is known as the perennial philosophy.
But I'm curious about the mechanism here. How does reading ancient religious texts actually decondition a modern mind from societal programming?
Well, it's about identifying the root code of consciousness. The perennial philosophy posits that beneath the varying dogmas of all major religions, there's a common underlying metaphysical truth.
Okay.
Huxley believed that societal conditioning, the words, the consumerism, the political identities we adopt, it all acts like a restrictive operating system installed in our brains.
A software we didn't choose?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to decondition yourself, you have to bypass that verbal programming and connect directly with that underlying universal truth. You have to realize that your socially constructed ego is an illusion.
And his search for a way to rapidly bypass that ego eventually led him away from ancient texts and back to the realm of biochemistry.
Yes. In early 1953, Huxley reached out to a British psychiatrist named Humphrey Osmond. He actually asked Osmond to supply him with a dose of mescaline.
And Osmond supervised the session, right?
He did, and Huxley used that profound psychedelic experience to write his famous book, The Doors of Perception. He became deeply invested in the potential of psychedelic drugs.
I am really struggling to reconcile this. I mean, this is the man who warned the world about a society permanently subdued by a state-mandated hallucinogen.
It seems completely contradictory.
It does. In Brave New World, Soma is the ultimate tool of oppression because it blinds people to reality. Yet, in his real life, he's actively seeking out hallucinogens. How did he justify that?
Well, he saw them as operating on entirely opposite mechanisms. Soma is an anesthetic, right? It numbs the user, it shrinks their awareness, and it makes them docile to external control.
Right, it's an escape.
But psychedelics, in Huxley's view, did the exact opposite. He believed that when used with serious intention, they acted as a chemical key to expand awareness, shattering that narrow, self-centered ego.
So he didn't see it as an escape from reality.
No, he saw it as a tool to wake people up to a much larger, unconditioned reality.
So let's take a step back and look at the massive arc of the life we've mapped out here.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. We've traced how a brilliant young man whose scientific career was totally derailed by blindness used his wide lens view of biology and industry to predict a terrifying future.
A future where humanity willingly trades its soul, its art, and its passion for chemical comfort and mindless stability.
Right. And we've unpacked his debate with Orwell, illustrating how pleasure can actually be a far more insidious jailer than fear. And we've seen how he spent his later years in the heart of Hollywood actively seeking spiritual and chemical mechanisms to liberate the human mind from the very societal programming he had diagnosed.
His entire life was just a relentless quest for true vision.
Yeah.
And the poetry of how that life ended is almost unbelievable.
It's wild.
On November 2010, 1963, Huxley was at home dying of laryngeal cancer. He had actually lost the physical ability to speak.
And that date is incredibly significant. His death was almost entirely ignored by the global media because President John F. Kennedy was assassinated on that exact same day. And in one of the most bizarre historical convergences, the author C.S. Lewis also died on that exact same afternoon.
It's strange how history aligns like that.
Yeah.
But as the world was completely chaotic outside, Huxley lay on his deathbed. Unable to talk, he wrote a final request on a piece of paper and handed it to his wife, Laura.
What did it say?
It read,
Hmm.
LSD, 100 grams intramuscular. She gave him the injection and then a second dose an hour later. The man who warned us about the dangers of chemical escapism sought one final mystical experience to decondition himself as he crossed over.
It is just such a complex, intentional exit for a man who spent his whole life analyzing the human condition.
It really is. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, drawn directly from Huxley's own reflection on his work.
What's that?
Well, in 1946, he wrote a foreword for a new edition of Brave New World. And looking back, he admitted that if he were to rewrite the novel, he wouldn't just leave John the Savage with a binary choice.
Right, between the primitive, miserable life on the reservation or the sterile, dystopian utopia of the world state.
Exactly. He believed there was a third alternative.
A third alternative.
Yes, he envisioned a decentralized society, a world where science and technology are utilized as if they were made specifically to serve human beings, rather than human beings being adapted and enslaved to serve the technology.
So what does this all mean?
Well, as you look around today, for everyone listening, as we rapidly deploy artificial intelligence, predictive algorithms, and increasingly immersive digital realities, you have to ask yourself, are we designing tools that serve our highest, most authentic human potential? Or are we, piece by piece, simply building a better, more efficient soma?